And now, more Utalk. Now.
Hey guys, what's up? This is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. It gives us a chance to pay tribute to everything that Asian Americans have done and Pacific Islanders to enrich America's history. And guess what? There is no one on the planet better equipped to be able to talk about this with us than our very own Larissa Lamb. Now, she's been MIA. Welcome back.
Hi, Steve. I missed you guys. My Italian family. I missed you.
Well, we've missed you as well. It's great to see you.
Hi, everyone. And, of course, my co-host, too, Katie Ann. I know this Instagram thing only allows us to be together, right?
Yes, that's right. And Larissa, you've got some very cool news. Let me see if I get this right, because I want you to unpack it for us. Okay. Yesterday was the broadcast premiere for your award-winning documentary film called Far East, Deep South. Tell us about what happened.
Yeah, it's that moment, like you listen to a song on the radio for the first time if you're like in a band or something and you're like, oh my gosh, absolutely. They're playing my song on the radio. Some of you have seen that older movie, That Thing You Do, but there's like this scene where they're walking down the street and they hear their song on the radio. So it kind of felt like that for us. We're like, oh my gosh, our movie is on TV for real, even though we watch it on a screen a lot of times. And thankfully, I actually got to watch my film last year on a movie theater screen when it debuted at a film festival. And that was like the last time people were like allowed in theaters for a while.
So this has been a journey for you guys. I mean, gosh, just getting to the point of getting it completed, filmed and all that goes on behind the scenes. And then boom, we get hit with the pandemic and
yeah, it wasn't the greatest, but the good thing is we were able to find ways to do film festivals virtually. They'd all moved online. And then, of course, if you missed the broadcast premiere, it's going to be re-airing on PBS World throughout the week, but you can stream it on pbs.org starting right now. And don't go away now to watch it.
Yeah, don't go now. No.
Wait till after our conversation here, and then you can actually go to pbs.org to watch it. It's also on the PBS app. So there's lots of ways to watch Far East, Deep South. And it's about my husband's family. We took a trip to Mississippi. Yes, Mississippi. And he's Chinese American. For those of you who don't know my husband, his name is Baldwin Chu, a.k.a. Only One. He's also known as a rapper. And we took a trip to Mississippi. Beatboxer, trying to find his roots. And his grandfather and great-grandfather were buried there. And we had no idea there was this history of so many Chinese families, not just his, in the Mississippi Delta. And so I wanted to just go on this. Well, I just got tagged along for this family trip. We thought we were going to be driving around town looking for a cemetery. And the next thing you know, we're in a museum that's full of stuff from Chinese families. There's a Chinese museum in the middle of Mississippi. We discover all sorts of crazy things connected to the family and the history of the Chinese in the South, that they were also impacted by segregation. And they also had to go to separate schools. They also had to be buried in separate cemeteries. And there's also another crazy law called the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 that a lot of people also don't know about, that impacted my husband's family. And Chinese, between 1882 and 1943, they were not allowed to come to the United States to become laborers unless you were part of an exempted class of merchants, and you couldn't become a citizen if you were Chinese. So
that's crazy.
All this crazy history. Yeah. So this is why during AAPI month, Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, we have this movie out, and we hope a lot of people will watch it. And it's the stuff you don't learn in school.
Well, you know what? It's obviously you sound very passionate about it. And I've kind of got another track, because prior to this film, you did another short one that was kind of a predecessor for this, kind of set the stage. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I did a short film called Finding Cleveland, and it was just about our first trip to Mississippi and what happened in less than 48 hours and all the amazing things that we discovered and and a little bit of the history we uncovered. But for Far East Deep South, which is a little over 70 minutes, it's a much different story. We plunge deeper into the history. We even find out that the Chinese and the Black communities had to live together because they both weren't allowed to live in white neighborhoods. And they kind of developed this symbiotic relationship with both communities. And so there's this fascinating, many fascinating facets of history that we discovered. You like, like what I did there? Fascinating facets.
Yeah, I that's great wordsmithing and tongue-tying possibilities as well. So is it fair to say, is it accurate to say that really your motivation for this film was way more than just family history? It was to be able to expose people to history that they probably are not aware of, probably haven't heard of, and making it known, because history is so rich and we need to know history as we learn to encourage one another and live with one another in community and support one another. And so, or was there something else? I don't want to put you in that little box.
Well, thank you, Steve. I mean, really, a lot of the inspiration was the fact that growing up, I think all of us, we learn about the American South, we learn about segregation, but we never learned that Asians were there too. And that a lot of this history impacted us, or we were even part of history. Because the way our history books are like written right now, like the Chinese came and they built the railroads and then they kind of disappeared. And the next thing you know, we fast forward to World War II and then you throw a bunch of Japanese into internment camps. And that's the extent of Asian American history that's taught in history books. And so what we hope to do with this film is to show that Asians have been here for a long time, have contributed to many parts of the country throughout many generations. In fact, Baldwin's grandfather and great-grandfather, and we find out through the course of the film, even great-great-grandparents had contributed significantly to the country, which makes Baldwin the fifth generation in America. And so there's a long lineage of there. I mean, you're Italian American, and
yes, absolutely.
You're third or fourth generation.
Fourth generation Italian American.
Fourth generation.
And it's interesting because as you talk about the history, the deep history and the contributions of Asian Americans, Chinese Americans, and so on, I'm sitting here kind of chuckling to myself because in a sense, Italians have suffered from the lack of knowledge of what we contributed. And a lot of people don't realize the racism our people faced, like when my grandparents and his brothers came and stuff. I think it helps us to understand, if we understand each other's stories, but it really means that we almost have to take the initiative, because it's hard for all of the history to be taught that really should be taught. And it does seem to me that, if I remember correctly, it just seems like there was a lot of repetitive history that we kept going back over again and going back over again, from elementary school to middle school to high school, even to college at some point.
Yeah, I mean, we really want to broaden the way that American history is taught. And the thing about, you're talking about your Italian heritage. There were Italians in the Mississippi Delta. And just like you said, they were also discriminated against in the early years. They were recruited to be farmers as well in the Mississippi Delta. And we're kind of ostracized a bit and looked down upon by a lot of members of the white community, the dominant group at the time. And so
at the time,
and they were certainly, not viewed as equal. And so there's very interesting about the different layers of race. And there was a Lebanese population there as well.
Oh, interesting.
So
I didn't know that.
There were Middle Easterners. There was a Jewish population. And, even in later decades, there was a Mexican population that was also brought in to help with the farming. So a lot of people, had to come to make the South go, right? So,
it's fascinating to me that when you think about the mosaic structure of our culture, because you've just named all these different ethnicities, and I'm remembering now with my grandfather, who was the mobster Big Ernie. We used to do a lot of business with Chinese Americans.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a natural when you and Baldwin and I and Katie and Bree connected, and it's rich and it's good and we should celebrate it.
And we don't learn about this in media and movies and films. So maybe we'll work on a movie about the Italians and the Chinese. And
that would be good.
And you stole our food, of course, Marco Polo, and
Okay, here we go. Okay, all right.
But
we digress.
Yeah, but in all seriousness, I mean, a lot of this history has been erased. A lot of this history has been excluded. And so what we really hope is that we can broaden the way that we discuss history, not because we're trying to be politically correct or doing it, to shove diversity in people's faces, but just because it's historically accurate, and that's what we want, is to show that, history just is. I mean, we have a friend who teaches history, and, he was saying that, history doesn't belong to, and he's white, and he was like, history doesn't belong to us, meaning, white people. It doesn't belong to even, Asians, doesn't belong to Italians or even African Americans. He's like, if we're going to be accurate about history, history just is. And it includes everybody.
Ooh, that's good. That's rich. That's huge.
But sadly, it's always one group that just tells that history, and unfortunately leaves a lot of other people out. Where you were talking about boxes earlier, but that's exactly how people like to tell stories. They like to put people in boxes.
Yes.
And as we know, humans are much more complicated. Race is much more complicated, and history is much more complicated. And so I think it does history a disservice if we only focus on things that are, just black and white, or in a lot of cases,
absolutely.
History books just very, very white.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because we have so much to learn from one another. Now, you've traveled a lot to different countries. I've been in, 29 or whatever. And I feel blessed because I've experienced so many different cultures. One place I haven't been is to the African continent, which I hope to at some point in time. But I feel like my life is richer. I mean, foods that I've been able to try. And I just remember now when we went with you and Baldwin to a Chinese restaurant in Alhambra, I think it was. Yeah. And that was amazing. But I have to laugh because the server, we don't speak, was it Cantonese or Mandarin?
I think it was Cantonese at that restaurant. Okay. Yeah.
And then you guys kind of ordered, then she looked at us and said, well, what are the white people going to eat? And it's like,
she did. That was so funny because she was not thinking you guys were going to be into whatever we ordered. And they didn't know you. Like, you guys are so open to cultures and food, because I guess there are some people that don't like to try exotic things. I don't even think what we ordered was like that exotic. I mean, I think it was,
it was great.
I don't think we made you eat anything really weird. I mean, Baldwin likes to eat chicken feet, but I don't think did he make you eat chicken feet? I don't think so.
We had some chicken feet and we had some dim sum. Yeah,
we did dim sum. So he did make you eat some chicken feet, but you were game. I don't do chicken feet.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I've had guinea pig, when I was down in Latin America. So, I had snake soup when I was in China. So, and that was kind of interesting, So I guess I've got the iron stomach because I've had people in other countries say, you probably don't want to eat this because, you're American. Well, no, I'm Italian American. I like to clarify that. But it's been interesting, and I am very open to it. But I feel like my life is richer.
Right.
But I think people miss out when they limit themselves instead of just learning to, find out about somebody else, find out about their culture, their foods, their art, their music. There's just, for me, when I'm going to a different country, one of the first things I want to do is find out where the percussion instruments are, because it's just so rich when you get to another country and go, wow, I didn't know you could play this and make this kind of sound.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing about music is there's commonalities in cultures because, there are types of drums in every culture, right? Like, people everywhere can find something to bang on. And like keeping a beat is just kind of this universal musical, language that we speak, right?
It is. It's the rhythm of life, that we speak. Now, let me jump back to something because I want to make sure that we articulate when somebody sees Far East, Deep South, is there one or a couple of main things that you want, like takeaways that you want people to grab? Because I think this is important. It's very important.
Yeah, well, I think that there's a couple of there's actually a lot of themes, but the main theme, I think, in this day and age too, sadly, during the pandemic, it's brought to surface some really ugly feelings and racism, let's be frank, towards the Asian community. In fact, just today, I was reading and saw a video where Asians in Baltimore and New York and San Francisco got attacked. There was one video, it was just horrific. Somebody was with a a cement block was like just beating two Asian women. And this was in Baltimore. And for no reason, unprovoked, completely unprovoked. And our society has, a problem. And part of it is there's a sentiment that somebody with an Asian face doesn't belong here. You wouldn't look at somebody who is got European roots and automatically think like, oh, you must be from France. Oh, you must be from Germany. And so, I mean, I know sometimes Italians actually get asked, oh, are you Italian? But not everybody assumes that, you must not be from here. But like, for some reason, when you look at someone Asian, and I would say, friends of mine who are from the Latinx community have the same issue too, where you automatically think, oh, they speak with a foreign accent. They must not be American. And so one of the things and themes of our film is the fact that, as we mentioned, Asians have been in America for a very long time. And just because we haven't learned about it and you haven't seen it portrayed in the media doesn't mean that that's not true. And so what we hope is to kind of help people reorient their thinking in terms of not assuming someone that is got an Asian face is automatically not from here. I was born here. And I have many friends, or if you talk about Baldwin, his family has been in this generation for like 5 generations, right? Which makes him, in some sense, quote unquote, more American than some people that you would perceive to even assume, quote unquote, were American. So like who we deem as belonging. I mean, I never completely felt like I belonged because there were so many times where, I'm not accepted completely as American because I'm Asian, and especially in especially in the entertainment industry.
Really?
It's like people don't think I'm American. They expect me to do Chinese music. They expect me to like do projects, write music that's Chinese. But yet I was born here. Like English is my first language. And then if I go to Asia, they don't accept me as being Asian enough. I'm the American. So a lot of us who were born in America or grew up in America, like have these identity crises. And so that's one of the things that we explore. And hopefully by the end of the film, people kind of understand what our struggles are and what the journey is. And that there is a history of discrimination against, Asians. Not that we want to completely dwell on that, but the fact is, I think there's this misperception kind of going back to like why people sometimes are hating on Asians. It's like, oh, well, they're privileged, or, oh, they get good grades, or, oh, they're doing well, or they're taking over our neighborhoods. And there's this misperception that we've not suffered, or we're this power that's trying to take over, or they confuse us with the communist government in China, or that we're all the same. So there's a lot of these themes where again, sadly, the current news is bringing these to the surface. And yet these are all sentiments and all things that I think have been going on. They've just all been bubbling to the surface. And so, what we hope is we can open a productive dialogue and hopefully we can gain allies. Like I know you're an ally. Like you have my back because we're friends. You got it.
We're
friends.
We are. I mean, we're family. And this is what concerns me is, the hatred. I mean, here's all this stuff that's happening as a result of the pandemic and COVID and so on. And people are, Asians have been kind of targeted. I'll use that word because I think it's true. And yet there's this hate that just is, I don't know if you saw it, it's gone viral. Not too far from where I live, a Mexican American, I'll call him that, police officer pulled over a lady who happened to be white. And this gentleman deserves a medal. She downdressed him. She called him a murderer. Just over and over and over again. And how he maintained the ultimate professionalism, and he had pulled her over because she was talking on her phone. That is a ticket. And, she went so far as to say, I know what the real issue is. You're jealous. You're Mexican and you'll never be white. You'll never, ever be white. Do you hear me? And it's like, first of all, why this guy didn't go, okay, lady, step out of the car, put your hands on the side, and you're going to kill me, she said, me and my son, and on and on and on. And she didn't have her driver's license, but she happened to have a picture of it. But I watched this, and I want your superior here. And it's like, how dare you? That's so disrespectful to a police officer, let alone somebody who happens to be Mexican American. And I'm catching more stuff that's being, let's not forget, before I even get to the Italian thing, the Jewish anti-Semitism is just it's not what has happened in the Asian community, but it's just racking up. And the Italian Americans now are being, approached in a couple places back east, and of all places, pizza restaurants. But it's like, why this hatred? Why don't we? And that was kind of why we threw those words out of kind of titling the show today is we need to refuse this. We need to refuse hate. I mean, there's no reason to hate somebody else. Are you hating them because you're jealous? And even if you had some bad experience, everybody's not the same. All Chinese Americans are not the same. All Italian Americans are not the same. We can go right down the list. I just really wrestle. You and I've talked about this before with this deep hatred. Obviously, there's an awful lot of unhappy people. This woman that downdressed the police officer was, and in my opinion, we see this happen. I think she's a teacher, she said.
Oh,
and
goodness,
she should lose her job. I mean, there should be no questions. I shouldn't judge because I need to, that's a whole other conversation. Yeah. But we need to refuse this hatred. We need to refuse racism. We need to refuse being mean. I mean, people are so stinking mean.
Yeah, and I feel like those of us who live in like bigger cities, especially in bigger suburbs, people are just meaner because I think we don't know each other and we're not neighborly to each other. Where I talk to some friends who are like in smaller towns and they're not struggling as much with some of those things because they tend to know, everybody knows your name in a sense.
That's true.
And the neighbors kind of look out for each other. But the larger your city gets, the larger the population is, more spread out or even densely populated it is, it's like people tend to just be meaner, I think, because they just don't know their neighbors. And during the pandemic, everybody's been isolated and nobody's even talking.
I was going to you took the words right out of my mouth, the isolation,
And you're purposely avoiding people, right? Like you used to walk around the street and you'd be like, hey, and now you're like
you got the mask on and
moving
all
away.
that, it's craziness. Now, I don't know. I didn't have a chance to ask you this before. Did you happen to see Tyler Perry's Oscar acceptance speech?
I loved it. Tyler Perry, I tweeted about it. It was magnificent.
Oh, it was powerful.
Tyler Perry for president.
Yeah, no, really. What a brilliant man. And if you have not seen that, just go to YouTube and just type in Tyler Perry Oscar speech. Boom, it's going to come up there because he won the humanitarian award. And what I liked about it too was it was short, it was succinct. I mean, everybody's cheering and clapping. Hey, sit down. I only have a couple minutes. I want to get right to it. And it was just brilliant. And that story about that dear lady with the who needed shoes.
Yep.
And yet he wanted to give her money. He saw her, she's homeless. I'm going to give her some money. And she came up and said, sir, do you have some shoes?
Yeah.
And what a powerful story. But you got to watch this thing. But I love what he said. We've got to meet each other in our humanity.
Yeah. And
we're all humans.
That's what we want to show in our film too, because at the core, even though there's a lot of historical facts, it's a human story, right? It's about Baldwin's family. It's about his dad and why he had to grow up without a father. And it's just this emotional journey and all the people that came out to support this family and show the generosity and try to recover their memories and recover the past. And it's kind of a beautiful thing. In the midst of discovering like the dark history of our country, we also see the humanity and the beauty of community. And so
yes, absolutely.
And if we could just get back to having and creating positive, encouraging community that help each other during difficult times, then I think, we can move forward, because I mean, as much as we're trying to hammer this into like education and stuff, but I mean, as you mentioned, it's like a lot of people learn about the Holocaust, but yet that doesn't prevent them from doing anti-Semitic things, that comes down to like you said, experience, but also comes down to environment and what they're being taught and what they're being nurtured to in their hearts. And so like we can't change behavior until we change hearts. And so, I mean, that's ultimately what we have to do is transform people and transform communities.
No, that's a great word because I'm going to throw in another word, ignorance. And again, we've had a chance to travel a lot. And when you mentioned the Holocaust, I had a chance to be in Europe and go to Dachau. And I will never forget the experience as long as I live. And there's an eternal flame outside, and there's a plaque, and it said that this may never be repeated again in history. And it's almost, I'm getting chills now thinking about going into where the ovens were.
Oh, yeah.
And
you just said that and it gave me chills.
Oh, and Larissa, the guide, said, if you stop, you can almost hear the cries of people.
Oh, yeah, that's just
and I can
chilling.
hear them right now. And what bothers me is how can one human do that to another? How can one human grab a big cinder block and hit those? Because they were closing their shop up, weren't they?
Yep,
the two?
yep, you saw it too.
Why would you do that? I don't understand what motivates somebody to do that. And there again is this hatred and this meanness. And we started something at Utalk, which we've never fully launched it like we want to, but the whole thing of hashtag goodbye to mean, refuse mean, say goodbye to mean. And it starts with us. It's like Tyler Perry said in his speech, we go to the middle, we come away from the walls, we go to the middle.
Yeah.
And we don't judge.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you're Black or if you're Asian American or LGBTQ or whatever. We accept each other. We help each other.
Right. Yeah.
And then you may disagree, and that's okay. We can have disagreements, but can we not accept the humanity of each other? I was at a protest march, and it was mainly African Americans, Blacks that were there, and younger people that were there. And they brought this speaker in, a college student who happened to be Black. And I went up to him afterwards and I said, dude, do you know what happens if I cut my arm and you cut your arm? We bleed the same color.
Right.
And he just looked at me and it was like he dropped his jaw. And he goes, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
That's our humanity. It's again, my life has been so enriched. Like working with you and Baldwin and other people in other countries. And I can't even contain all of it, let alone the food, and it shows, but, but it's just, you're missing out if you continue to be mean to people and hatred. Refuse to hate, refuse to be a racist, and learn from each other. Now, before we lose track of time, I want to make sure, again, how can people see Far East, Deep South? Where can they go to view it right now? Because that's important.
Right. Well, for the month of May, you can watch Far East Deep South on pbs.org. You can stream it for free. It's also available on the PBS app. You can also go to our website, fareastdeepsouth.com, to find other screening information. There's a lot of cool panels that we're doing this month, all because of Asian American Pacific Islander Month. And if you're watching this like way beyond May, there will be other opportunities that you can check out on our website. And you can follow us on Instagram as well at Far East Deep South.
Awesome. Good stuff. And I'd encourage you guys to do that. I really would. I do, and there's a lot you can learn. Larissa, because you've been around Utalk for quite a while, that we're really big on going mad, making a difference. I don't want to oversimplify a complicated issue. I've been criticized for that, but to me, it's like, how does a journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step? So yes, there are complex issues, and we can't oversimplify them, but we can begin to take bite-sized chunks. Somebody once said, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. But taking bite-sized chunks, and in this case, when it comes to racism, when it comes to hatred, when it comes to meanness, is there something that we can do, or a couple somethings that you see where we could start making a difference? We could start being the change when it comes to refusing hatred, racism, and meanness.
Yeah, I think for one, for those who, may have not thought about the Asian American experience, I really encourage you to learn more about it. And some great ways to do that is, our movie is our Far East Deep South for one, but also PBS has a slate of various films and documentaries that are covering the Asian American experience, and they have a list of those on pbs.org.
Okay.
And so I highly encourage you to watch those, especially there's a documentary series that came out last year called Asian Americans, that is streaming for free. Actually, most of them are streaming for free this month. And so it's important, I think, to know more about other cultures and know that history. And also just, again, I know you said don't simplify things, but if you do have an Asian friend already, that's a great place to start, is just maybe have a conversation with them about like maybe how they're, what generation they are in this country, or, what their heritage is.
Sure.
So I'll give you some tips. Don't ever ask someone Asian, where are you from? Where are you really from? Don't ask them that. And don't ever say, like, tell me everything about Asian Americans. Because that's like too much, like for them to have to like tell you everything. They're not going to know, but just ask them. Right. Just ask them about their heritage, and if they're like don't assume that their parents aren't from here or that they're not from here, but just ask them about their heritage and what they do know, and maybe some customs and things that they may observe that, they could share with you, or just even, I think even having a conversation about just like, what are the things that you struggle, or do they struggle with identity, or what are some of the things that they struggle? Because a lot of times I think people are afraid to ask. And, and there's some schools of thought that are like, well, it's not on you to ask somebody Asian, like what their experience is. But I'm not talking about, again, you don't need to ask somebody Asian the history and culture of everything. That's not their job. But they can tell you about their own personal family's history, and their own story, because they know about that. They may not know everything, but they know about their own life and what their family may have gone through. So I think those are two really great ways to start in this conversation specific to the API community, but you can apply that to like any other culture. I was going to
say, we can take what you just said and just expand it. And we need to learn to have conversations, and we need to learn to not just hear, but listen. And that doesn't mean that you're, getting overly anxious, by what somebody's saying. You're just having a conversation. It's, and the whole idea of sharing heritage and customs and, to me, that's rich to be able to sit down with different people. And again, I've experienced it in all these different countries, but we can learn so much from one another, and we can celebrate, and we can appreciate, and if nothing else, have a meal together. Seriously, it's just
meals are a great way to, talk over things or even exchange cultures. And, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but like one of my friends has a t-shirt that says like, he's Chinese American like myself. And it says like, you love our food, love our people too,
I love
because it. It's like, that people
that can apply to Italians too. You love our pizza and our pasta, and so love us. Yeah.
And so that's the irony. Like everybody loves Panda Express. Like, so why don't you love the people that are where the culture comes from? We do have to get back to basics in a way where we just have to respect one another and value and be compassionate. And I feel like, we talked about this all the time, like meanness has kind of ruled over this world, and we just have to get back to being human and treating each other with basic decency. Cause I don't know, I'm kind of scared, Steve, of where the world is going,
Larissa, I am too, I'm very, very concerned. And, to me, I keep saying this to different people. It isn't rocket science. There's something called the golden rule, and it's found in every major religion throughout the world. And it's very simple. Treat others the way you want to be treated. And that to me, that's just core. I want to treat you the way I want to be treated. And of course, bullying, that's a whole nother conversation, is out of control. But why can't we just refuse the hatred, the meanness, the racism, and let's just treat each other the way we want to be treated? I think, it's funny. I told that to my neighbor one time. He goes, Steve, this could change the world. And I said, yes, Lloyd, it could change the world. It's so simple. And maybe people just ignore it because it's so simple.
I think it is. And by nature, I think we're all selfish, right? We're all selfish and self-centered. And I think that's what's gotten the best, and the sad thing is, and we talked about this before, like when we did topics on social media, it's like social media has, I think, made everybody meaner because you're going to get likes and clicks because if you say something extreme. And so you almost don't have a motivation to like say something nice because people, are just feeding off of the outrage. And even like with all the Asian hate crimes that we're witnessing, sadly, our community is getting more angry because we keep seeing these things, and those are the things that keep getting circulated. And then I'm just afraid people are going to be bitter from our community, and they're going to give up on humanity, and then they're just going to turn into the people that are hating on them, and so the hate just keeps going round and round and round and round.
Yeah, it's a vicious circle. It's just a vicious circle.
As opposed to, like you gave with your example, like the cop who was Mexican American, where it took a lot for him to love the woman who was just being so racist towards him and yelling at him. And he had every right to yell back at her. But the hardest thing to do is to take the higher road and to love your enemy, right? So, to turn those enemies into friends and allies. And that's the key, is never think your enemy is always your enemy. That enemy could actually be your ally. In fact, you were talking about ignorance earlier. Will Smith recently did an interview, and he actually mentioned that people were asking about growing, kind of coming up in Hollywood, how did he deal with racism? And he says most people are just ignorant. And so he says ignorant can be taught, but of course there's going to be people that are just pure evil. And, he's I'm not even going to just deal with them. But he says the majority of people are just ignorant, and ignorance you can change someone who's ignorant. And I thought that
powerful.
I thought that was really great, aspect, because I know it's easy to write people off and even give up in fighting, in fighting the good fight, so to speak. And so I just encourage everyone out there. It's if you feel discouraged and you feel nothing's going to change or things are just going to get worse, just know that you got to make progress. And, having made a movie about the 1800s and the 1900s, when there was a Chinese Exclusion Act and there was segregation, I do have to say, from a societal standpoint, from a law standpoint, we have progressed. So now it's more of a human thing that I think we're losing.
That's the whole, it's respecting each other's humanity, right. And if we can do that, rich conversation. We got to do some more of this as you guys continue to produce things, and we'll grab you from time to time when we can to talk more about this. And again, people want more about Far East Deep South. Where's the best place to go?
Go to our website, fareastdeepsouth.com. And of course, you can watch our film on PBS. Go to pbs.org. Also check your local listings that may be playing on World PBS. But if you're on Instagram, you're probably a streaming type of person. So you can stream it on pbs.org.
Well, hey, it's great to see you. We miss you. And thanks for taking time. And we'll see you soon.
Bye.
This is Utalk Radio.